everybody. Welcome back to Beauty and Being. I'm your host, Sarah Callahan, and today I am joined by my friend Matt Cornish. Now, Matt was first my boss when I was a STEM counselor, and he was the person that hired me for my favorite job in the world. And very slowly over the years, him and I became better friends. I served as his assistant director for a couple of years. And he also is the person that has taught me a lot about intentional community building and just the importance of fostering friendships with the space that you're in. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction and thank you so much, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and if nothing more, just share this time in conversation with you about wherever this takes us today. So it's just good to be with you again. It's been too long. So
It's good to be with you too. I know it's been a transition and it's been a couple of months, so I'm happy to kind of sit down and just share this time with you today. So thank you so much.
yeah, yeah.
So, Matt, if you would just share with the listeners anything you'd like to, but specifically about who you are, how did you get to where you are today, and yeah, just take it away.
Well, I was born in 1981 in the city of Lowell, Massachusetts. No, I won't start all the way back there. Not because, I mean, I'm just happy to share about myself. I feel like I'm the kind of person who I don't love to talk about myself just because I like to talk about myself, but because I like to share who I am with people and, wanting people to know me as well as possible. And so sometimes I sit there and I go, I don't know which details are not going to be important to us building a connection. So I'm just going to give you all of them and you decide. So I won't go all the way back to birth, but I will say that um, where I am now as compared to where I was as a kid are completely different places than I think I ever would have expected. Not that when I was a kid I had any real expectations of where I was going to be, but I've lived in cities and I've lived in the middle of nowhere, and that all started for me being born in Lowell, Massachusetts. Lowell is a pretty good sized city in Mass, old mill town, National Historic Site. And growing up for me, like Lowell was a very diverse location, and we spent quite a lot of time with my church when I was younger. I grew up in the Salvation Army. My grandparents on my mother's side were both ministers in the Salvation Army. Actually, my sister is currently a minister in the Salvation Army. I am not an active member of the Salvation Army anymore. Because as a young adult, I sort of stepped away from some aspects of that religious life that didn't mesh for me anymore. Um, but it was a very big part of who we were, and as such, I grew up you know, with a pretty diverse group of people around me all the time. Lowell had a huge population of Vietnamese refugees when I was a kid in Lowell. So this wonderfully diverse landscape was where I got to grow up. And then when I moved to Connecticut, which was right before I started high school, my family moved to Connecticut to like probably the complete opposite end of the spectrum that you could to rural farmland in Connecticut, where we lived when I did high school. And so I spent all my high school years in this very, very small community, a high school of 500 or so people, 88 in my graduating class, that sort of number. Um, and then went on to college to a very small liberal arts university in Pennsylvania, things like that. So I was bouncing all over the place. But to take a step back, throughout all of that, I think there have been some things that have been consistent for me in my life. Um, when I was younger, as I mentioned, church was a really big piece of that. You know, we didn't live at church, but we might as well have. My parents were both um, music ministers in our church community. They worked very heavily with youth programs. We were there all day every Sunday, as well as multiple times during the week for band rehearsals or choir rehearsals or youth programs or whatever might be going on. And so like there was just this built-in community that I was a part of that was not a choice of mine. It was like we go here, we do this is where we are. So I knew all these kids who were also at church with us. I didn't know half of their parents because some of them are there without their parents. My church would, do pickups and bring anybody in who wanted to come in, all that sort of stuff. But music was a big component of that. And so, in the Salvation Army, brass band music and choral music are really important to what they do, in addition to the other sort of social ministries that they work towards. But I was raised in this musical, diverse community. And a part of that was that as a child, I would go to summer camp. Once, even before I was old enough to be a camper, my parents would be adjunct staff for a week of music camp at Camp Wonderland, which is a Salvation Army camp in Massachusetts. Um, and so, as a 5-year old, I remember being a staff kid for a week, being at camp and falling in love with camp because we did opening campfire and we sang camp songs, and there was the beach and we could go swimming, and the canteen was open after lunch, and all these sorts of things. And so naturally, when we were old enough to go as campers, we went as campers. For the first 3 or 4 years of my time as a camper, my parents were on camp at the same time as I was. So, like, there wasn't really this big separation that needed to happen. I'd see them every day, like once in a while. As I got older, it was like, no, leave me alone, go somewhere else. I don't want to talk to you. But, um, you know, uh, that was a very big piece of that, going to music camp as a kid. And I did that every single summer, right up into high school. I would go back, even once we moved to Connecticut, I would go back for this music conservatory that they would do. Um, my sisters were both musicians and singers as well. We were a very musical family. Both my parents were music teachers for a while, as well. Um, all of us played brass band instruments. Like, I played the tuba. My father was a trumpet player in high school and college, but had started playing trombone and euphonium. My mom was a cornet player. My youngest sister was a trumpet player. My middle sister was a French horn or an alto horn player. And so, like, when we all got together, we were the Cornish family brass quintet. So, like, again, music continually being a major piece of my young life. And for a lot of that, there was not a choice. It was just like, oh yeah, you're going to play. We're going to do this thing. You need to come because you're playing tuba. You've got to be a part of this. There was no conversation. It was just like, nope, we're doing this. Um, and so, we've got camp, we've got music, and then combined with music, a lot of the time, because of the fact that, the Salvation Army where I grew up is very big into social ministries. There's this aspect of most Salvation Army churches called the League of Mercy. And League of Mercy is that, like, you pick like one Sunday a month and you'll go somewhere to just like go to a nursing home and visit with the residents. And when my family would go, is we're going to go and play brass band music for a little while and then go talk to people and drop off a little gift and do that sort of stuff. And my father was amazing at this. Like, my father was like, my dad could walk into a room and start a conversation with anybody at all, and just like act like he had known them for ages and years. And um I would always get really nervous because I was just like, well, I'm in a nursing home. Like, I don't know this person doesn't seem like they're even fully cognizant right now. As a kid, like, that was sort of where my mindset was. But I watched as my dad, was able to do this and build these connections and make these find this way to meet people where they were, um, in what seemed an effortless fashion. Um, and so now we've got service-minded things, we've got music, we've got camp. And then when I got to high school, we threw theater into the mix, because once I got to high school, I had never really done legitimate theater until that point. I would do performances in middle school. I was part of choirs. My mom was our youth choir director in church, and so, like, every Christmas we'd have major parts of the pageant, things like that. So, like, I was performing and doing things like that. But then I got to high school and, like, actually went out for a musical. And because it was a very small school, as a ninth grader, I got cast in a lead in a musical and was like, oh, this is pretty awesome, and kept doing that all the way through. So now we've got music, we've got theater, we've got camp, we've got service. um, and I could go on and on and on and on forever. But when I got to college, I was actually a music education major to start with. Megan, if you're out there, we have
Mhm.
that commonality. I did not stick with music ed though. When I got to college, like, I saw that there was a theater program and they had a major and things like that. But I was like, I'm not going to be a theater major. I just want to keep doing shows. I keep wanting to perform. And so I went out for a couple. In my second year, I got cast in the Scottish play, Shakespeare's the Scottish play. For those of you out there who are superstitious, you understand what I'm doing. It's silly. I'm not superstitious about like anything else, but that's one thing that I will be very, very careful about. I got cast in that, and I was working on that like 5 nights a week, things like that. And I was also taking an elementary vocal methods class. And one Friday, I went into my class and I was behind on like 4 assignments. And my teacher held me afterwards. She goes, "You're missing a few things." And I was like, "Yeah, I totally am. I've been at rehearsal every night this week. And unfortunately, this is the class that I decided to sort of let slide." And she goes, "You know that my class is not a class that you want to let slide." And I said, I'm well aware of that. And I'm rethinking my choices. But she goes, "Maybe your priorities aren't in the right place." And like, if that's the case, that's nothing to be ashamed of. Like, where is your heart right now? Where are you feeling drawn to? And so I changed to a theater major, and became a theater major, and then added an extra year of college, and I'm now will be in debt until the day I die. So, but I became a theater major, and then went right on to graduate school after that um, to become an actor. I got my master's in acting out in Chicago, lived in Chicago for 3 years, at the Chicago College of Performing Arts, met amazing artists, worked with awesome, awesome people, learned more about my craft. But what was still happening every year from when I was a sophomore in high school, until I finished graduate school really, was every summer I was still going back to camp. Um, and if we're jumping around in time, which I am, is my sophomore year of high school. I'd been going to camp as a camper for ages. It was time to like get a summer job that year. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I was like, well, people work at camp all the time. Every time I go to camp, there's always people my age who are working like in the kitchen or for the maintenance crew or whatever. Like I could do that. I should work at camp. I like camp. I like being there. There's no reason to think I won't like this job. One of my very good friends who was in choir with me was like, my dad's the executive director of a camp right down the road here. Why don't you come and be a counselor in training there? Then we can hang out all summer long. You're not that far from home, so like you could still go home on the weekends without much of a problem. Check it out. So I did, and then I never looked back. And I stayed at that camp for 20 some odd years. After that, started as a CIT at the age of 16. Went back every single summer, even once I got to college when I was doing other things. Like I did a summer of summer stock in Vermont. I was doing all this other stuff. I would still come back for at least 1 week every summer to do something. Um, and so I was continuously on this track where like I couldn't leave camp behind because in my humble opinion, I was like, there are two things that I'm qualified to do in this world right now. And it's theater and music, which sure that's two things, but like I look at them as one thing, and it's camp. Like those are the two things that I feel like I'm most qualified to do. And so I just kept going back to camp all the time. Um, I was working in senior citizen daycare for a while, which is a thing if you've never realized that. Doing programming with them, but finally got a job running an after-school theater program that I was subsequently fired from after about 6 months of working with them. That's a much longer story that I could go into another time. But that sort of broke everything because it was like, I've got this trajectory I think I'm on, which is I'm going to try and become a theater educator. That's what I'm going to do. And then this job I lost. And I started substitute teaching just to have something to do while I figured out what the next step was. And meanwhile, my wife Melissa was saying to me, you came home with this bad news, and yet you seem the happiest you've been in 6 months because this job was just, one that was rough. But I figured, while I'm figuring out what the next steps are, I should do the things that I know I can do. So looked back at the camp that I'd been working at, and I was like, do you need someone this summer? Meanwhile, I'm now like 30 something at this point. And I was like, do you need somebody? I'm in between things. They had a new camp director who was like, actually, yeah, come be my program director for the summer. And I started working with him, and I was taking on a lot more responsibility than I ever had in the camp world before that. And started talking to the executive director at the time, who in the end has taught me an awful lot about sort of the active camp administration. Gene Handler, who is, I'm sure, not listening to this right now, but if you are somewhere, Gene, thanks so much. Um, Taught me a lot more than I ever thought I wanted to know about camp administration. Um, and one day I was just asking her, and I was like, what does it take to do this, you know, all the time. Like, what does it take to become a camp director? She's like, that's a conversation I'd be interested in having with you if you want to sometime. And so we'd touch base over the course of that summer, and I'd ask some questions and things like that. And then that sort of like disappeared because life moved on. They had another camp director the following summer. I went back, did the week that I normally do. I had found another job that I was working on at the time, and so I was working as an educational paraprofessional in the state of Connecticut, and so like I was doing other things and noticed trends here, of course, and then the camp director who was working at the time, who was a very good friend of mine, who we had been CITs together, revealed to me at the beginning of the summer that she started. She was like, "So I just found out I'm pregnant. I don't know what I'm going to do after this. If I'm going to like, try and come back to camp again, or if I'm going to just switch gears and do something different." And she chose to do something different after that camp season was done. And so here I am. I've never had any formal training in camp administration aside from what I've learned on the job. Um, but I've got all this background in theater and music, but I know this one program super, super well. And I've been the performing arts head, I've been the head counselor, I've done all the jobs you could possibly do aside from camp director. And I get a call from Jean one day saying, "Hey, I want to talk to you. Can we can we set up a meeting?" And so I sat down to meet with her, and she was like, "So I want you to be the next camp director." And I was like, "Oh, out of the blue. Like, I didn't apply for this. I didn't ask anybody." I remembered very vividly the very first camp director I ever worked for, Aaliyah Vakito, who was also another amazing human being, taught me so much about just like relating to kids and like listening and providing space to listen. I remember one day standing in the office with her when I was like 21 or something like that, and talking to her, and she looked at me and she was like, "You're going to sit in this chair someday." And I laughed in her face. I laughed right in her face. I was like, "I have no desire to have your job at all. None whatsoever." Anyway, here I am, a camp director now, and I have been a camp director for over, I think, about 15 years now is what we're coming up on, almost, not quite. Maybe I'm at 14, but so I ended up with this job falling into my lap in a residential overnight camp, and that was wonderful. I at one point thought I was never going to leave that space, but it wasn't a full-time camp director job. It was, I worked all year round. I had housing at the camp, things like that, but it wasn't full time. And when our daughter Imogen was born, it was time to sort of go, "Hey, what's the next thing?" Because right now, the only option we have is Melissa goes back to work because that's where all of our benefits are and things like that. And I, you know, that's not fair to her that she doesn't get to spend a lot of time with our daughter. It was wonderful for me because I got to spend formidable amounts of time with my daughter in her first year of existence. Um, but that was not so great for Melissa. And so I started earnestly going, "Well, what's the next thing? Like, what's next?" And that's how I found Camp Beechcliff. Actually, Melissa and I found the ad for Camp Beechcliff independently of each other. And she texted me one day and was like, "You need to apply for this one." And I wrote back and I was like, "I literally just sent my cover letter." Um, and so I've been here now for coming up to my eighth summer. Um, and, you know, bringing with me all of this, the things that have never shifted is sort of this, the importance of serving others has been carried with me from when I was a kid. Um, really, really built into me as a child, the importance of serving others and sort of the value that others have, regardless of what they may have to offer in return. Um, this passion for performance, theater, music, all of that, which is something that, I'm not a professional actor right now, but I look and I go, I use my training every single day in the summer. Like, Director Matt is partially a character that I play, and
I,
partially me, but um,
I also want to
and,
say the character of Director Matt has also been played up more and more over the years with the Fracky Fridays.
oh,
Like
100%. Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother level. Those are characters within
yeah.
characters. Characters within characters that I get to play. But underneath it all, this love for camp. And like when I look at the things that, especially in music and theater and camp, that really, that I really loved, is, if I'm being honest with myself, like a lot of the reasons I got into theater in the first place when I was a freshman in high school was, hey, I need a space where I'm going to make some other connections. I'm new in this high school. I need to deepen my connections to this community. This is going to be a way to do it, and I'm good at this. So, you know, people will see that I'm good at this, and like maybe that'll make them want to bring me into their community as well. Um, and continuing to do that in a lot of ways. And camp was sort of the same way. Camp was about, you know, microcosms of what the world could be if we all could get out of our own way and like figure it out a little bit, to understand that like we're coming from all these different places, but like we're coming with a purpose, which is to know each other as best we can, to support each other as best we can, so we can support these other small people who are figuring out how to be humans in the world. And meanwhile, most of our staff are also still figuring out how to be humans in the world. So it was all very, it's all been very driven, without me really realizing it, by this notion of wanting to cultivate and find the spaces and people that helped me, number one, feel like I had my spaces and people, but also help me to create that for others. That um, wanting to create spaces where everyone is welcome, and they still might not be for everybody. Like people might still decide that's not for me, and that's okay. But knowing that like you are welcome here, and like we want you as you are. We want you um, as who you are, and we want to be able to learn and grow together, and to make new discoveries together, and new choices together. So yeah, so that's about a half hour of what led me to where I am right now.
But
I told you, I don't know how long-winded to be sometimes, and
no,
it just goes.
no, I appreciate it because I have so many questions just from all of that. Um, but the biggest one in my head from right now, from everything that you said, was I think it stems from, maybe it was because of Emma and my conversation a couple days ago, but it really sounded like there was a point in your life where you had these two passions, whether it's for your career or personal, but it was music, education, and musical theater, and then it was camp. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like there was a point in your life where it was these two things that you were navigating, and it's how do we um, I feel like, because I'm a little bit earlier on in my life and career aspirations, but I always find myself in between these two things of what should I choose, where do I go from this? And so I guess, how did you navigate that? And I know it worked out for you, and I know that you love working at camp, and I know you love what you do. But in that moment, I guess, what helped you navigate, feeling torn between these two things?
Um, to be bluntly honest,
Mhm.
it was the fact that it didn't really feel like there was a choice. That
Okay.
like I wanted there to be a choice, but there wasn't really a choice. What do I mean by that? Um, so like when I finished up graduate school out in Chicago, I had an agent and everything. I had representation, but I was like, I'm going to go back to camp one more summer, and then when I come out in the fall, I'm going to like work with my agent. I'm going to try and get gigs. I'm going to go out on auditions. I'm going to do things. Melissa and I are going to move out here together. We were engaged at that point. It was like we'll both move out here at the end of the summer. We'll Melissa will find a job in Chicago. I'll find work to do while I'm doing the audition thing, and trying to get up and off my feet. Um, and you know when you are someone who, if you want to make a big life shift like that, and your family's not really able to help financially support that sort of thing, and you've got to make that happen on your own, like neither Melissa nor I were people who are families and be like, oh yeah, here's what you need for a security deposit and the first and last month's rent on an apartment. And we realized about halfway through the summer, as we were like trying to figure out what our plan was going to be, that we we weren't going to be able to afford that move. Like we weren't going to be able to afford to go and find an apartment in the city of Chicago, let alone rent a truck and move what we had, what small amount of stuff we had, out to Chicago. And that sort of put everything on hold. And, I at that point was living in a world where when it came to theater and it came to the arts, I had just spent 3 years building connections in Chicago. Like Chicago was the place that if I was going to get started, I was going to have to do it there if I wanted to like try and make a profession out of this. Um, because you'll even talk to people nowadays who are like, they start in Chicago or like, and then they're going to make the move to New York, and they don't have the connections in New York. They don't have a presence in New York. And so like, it's like starting all over again. Whereas like when you're in this space, you can be in this space. And so, we both said, hey, this is it. This is fine. I had already been sort of leaning towards like, that education was the route I wanted to go down anyway, and that maybe teaching theater was more what I wanted to do. Um, just because sort of the pressure of the balance of being an auditioning actor who's just starting out. I was like, how does one do a job and be able to go to auditions whenever you want to? Are you just changing jobs all the time? Or do you have to like, or is there a whole lot of extra work where you're getting someone to cover your shifts all the time? And that's just a lot. That's a lot of work that doesn't have anything to do with the work that I want to do. Uh, but that's neither here nor there. So when that happened, it was sort of like, okay, we figured it out. Melissa still had a job in Connecticut that she was able to do. Um, I personally, there were options, so I just started looking around. I moved in with Melissa's family for a bit. Worked at a bookstore for a while, sold books. I was doing um, some like freelance theatrical education through another company, just doing a lot of different things. So I was still doing stuff that I loved, but finally ended up like falling into the space where um, I had found the job working in senior citizen daycare and doing that. So it was like I had to sort of defer that. And for a while, I I was pretty hard on myself about that. Like I didn't let that out to people. Like I didn't put that out in the world to be like, oh man, life sucks and it's terrible. But like internally, I was just like, I'm not doing anything I thought I was going to do. I'm not doing this. I liked what I was doing good enough. Like the old folks that I worked with were a stitch and a half, and apparently my demographic is elderly women over the age of 70 because my butt got grabbed in that facility more than ever in my life before. Let me tell you. But like we had a good time, and like it was an all right job, and that worked. I was still going to camp for a week here and there every now and then. I actually started doing community theater, and like what I started realizing, and what I think I finally, and like nowadays, what I have come to fully understand, and you can hear this from someone, but I think you have to come to this conclusion on your own. You have to realize it, is that it's not actually a choice. There's never a moment where you legitimately actually have to choose between one thing or the other. you know, it might mean that I'm not going to do this as a career, but that doesn't mean I can't do that. It doesn't mean I can't stay involved in this. I'm in a production of The Wizard of Oz right now, playing the Cowardly Lion, and my daughter is making her stage debut right now. And, it's a vastly different sort of environment and medium than some of the things I used to do. Some of the things I used to do in Chicago or even like in Connecticut, I was heavily involved with a number of theaters. But I'm still getting to practice my craft. I'm still getting to work with others. I'm still getting to try and help create an intentional community in that space that's rooted in like giving, especially young people, an experience of like, what does it mean to like really come in and be a part of building something together with a common goal, with a common end? And in this case, it's theater, and whether that's learning what it takes to like make it through a rehearsal and learning rehearsal etiquette, or whether it's like staging, or whether it's just being an example of like, how do we hold ourselves in rehearsal, and how do we, how do you make big choices and bold choices? Like I'm still doing that stuff. um but what I think I discovered is that it doesn't have to be a choice, as long as you can find yourself doing things that, at the risk of repeating what I heard Emma talking about earlier today, as long as you're finding something that like fulfills you in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to make this choice. It doesn't have to be, well, it's either music and theater or it's youth work or it's
Mm.
this or it's that. Like you can do all these things. Like you can do all these things. And, if you really look at history and like the work of history, now granted, this was mostly through wealthy people of means, but like through most of recorded history, you didn't have a lot of people that were just one thing or another.
Mhm.
Like, pursuing your arts, pursuing other things, like those were things that you did to be a well-rounded human being. Like we still should be doing that stuff. It baffles me that there are not more people who don't learn to play the piano just for the sake of learning to play the piano anymore, or who don't continue learning an instrument just because it's a good thing to do, because it makes you a well-rounded individual. You can still do all of these things, even if it's not the thing that you've decided I'm going to choose to make money with, and I'm going to choose to go down this path. And sometimes that's the thing that I want to try and like, when I'm working with kids, teach them is like, yeah, great. Yeah, you're going to have to make choices. Like you're going to have to make choices, but those choices don't have to be, well, I can't be this anymore. I can only be this. That doesn't have to be the way things are. That's so limiting. It limits yourself. It limits your area for expansion, because when you're continuing to explore all of these other aspects of who you are as a human, like you continue to grow, you continue to learn, you continue to discover new things about yourself. um I was in a conversation with Nina down at the front desk back a couple weeks ago, and we had a little deck of question cards, and she was just like, pull one out and read it. And the question was, at what age does someone become old? And I was thinking about that a lot. And I didn't think about it too much. I thought about it for like 10 minutes, and I was like, no, this is my answer. My answer is, you become old when you stop realizing that you've got things that you can learn, and that there are things that you should continue to learn. Like that's what to me makes someone old. So I can meet a 90-year-old person who is every day like, I am open to what's coming at me. I'm interested in what's next. I'm super cool, like interested in like learning about other people's perspectives. I want to know what makes life different now than it did when I was a young person. And that person is not an old person to me. Like that person is learning and growing and developing. And there's some science that's like still being tested that looks at the notion that, like, all those brain cells that we sort of lose, and those mental connections that we break as we get older, that, for a long time, the whole notion of you can't teach an old dog new tricks, a lot of that was rooted in the fact of, like, once these certain synapses stop firing, like we can't build them again. Well, there's now science that, again, is still being looked at, but that's pointing at that and saying, like, no, 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 if you engage in play and learning, like you can rebuild some of those connections in your head, even into your twilight years. You can build new connections and not have to lose all of that. So to me, it's super exciting to think about the fact that I can do something that I like doing. And like, I never thought camp was going to be a thing that I did with my life, but I get to come to a job every day that I really, really love, work with awesome people, meet more new people every year. I get to expand my collection of people every year. My collection grows and grows and grows every year, which is wonderful. It's great. I have all these folks that I've, whether I've been connected to or whatever that might be, um, and do something that I enjoy doing, that I love. And it's super stressful sometimes, and it's like ridiculously hard sometimes. And sometimes all I want to do is bang my head against a wall. But guess what? That's life. Like that is existence in and of itself. So no matter what you're doing, you might find those moments. But at the same time, I get to enjoy where I'm spending the majority of my life, but that doesn't mean that I have to lose these other pieces that make me me. I can still sing. I can still make art. I can still practice my theatrical craft. I can still learn a new skill. I can still pick up a needle and thread and learn to sew if I want to. Like nothing is stopping me from doing that just because I said, oh, I've decided to go down this path. Like, and I think we're creatures that like to get in our own way and believe that there comes a point where I have to make a choice. And the answer is, y- yeah, you might have to make a choice, but you don't have to separate yourself. You don't have to resign yourself to being something different or something new. Resign yourself to growth. Resign yourself to like making new discoveries. Yes, all 100%, like do that, but you don't need to feel like you're stuck and that you've gone, I've got to settle on this. This is the path forward, because the path is constantly changing. You know, there, one of the biggest lies I feel like society tells all of us, you've probably heard me say this before. And one of the things I wish that as adults we were more honest with young people about is that none of us actually have any idea what we're doing. Like we are all just making it up as we go along. Even the people, like thinking about the people who you have the most respect for because they feel like they've got power and well-being and they're like influential people. And I guarantee if you sat down and talked to them, they'd be like, I don't know, I'm just making it up as I go. Like I got somebody else who told me this was a good idea, and I went, okay, is that a good idea? Yeah, I'm going to do that then. Everybody's making it up as we go along, and because of that, what doesn't exist in the world is a moment where you just stop and go, whew, it's smooth sailing from here. I don't need to think or do anything anymore. Because it's not. Like, even if it was, like, we'd still have to exist as people. Like, we still have to find ways to feed ourselves and do things like you don't ever rest is important, but like the idea of rest perpetual or a space where it's just like life is free and easy now, it's a fiction, it's a myth, it doesn't exist. And that can be depressing to you or it can be a great joy. Like, yeah, I don't ever have to stop. Like, yeah, okay, man, maybe it thinks that I have to work a little hard all the time. Maybe it thinks that I'm never going to get to a point where I can go, yep, everything's good, I don't need to think or work or grow or anything like that. But like, what a beautiful thing to have that opportunity to go like, yeah, I've got to be paying attention because what's the next thing there is to learn? What's the next thing that gets to be thrown at me? How can I express myself in new ways? So that's a very long-winded answer to that question, but I think that's probably where I'm going to stop that answer.
No, I appreciate that answer for a couple of reasons. The first one is just as an aside, I that phrase like, um, nobody has it all together. Nobody knows what they're doing 100% of the time is something I think about, and that's also something I said to I've said to my high school students because I had a student that was, she came in upset and she's just like, I just want to have it figured out already, and I was like, I don't want to say her name, but I told her, I don't have it figured out. Like, I know I'm your teacher. I know I'm the adult in the room. I don't have it figured out. Your parents don't have it figured out. And that's okay. And we're never going to figure it out. But
Yeah.
we're going to try our best. And you're trying your best. And I'm trying my best. And that's all that matters. And, because I think she was upset about a test in a different class. And I was like,
Hmm.
I know you tried your best and we just have to move forward. And I think that's a really important lesson for everybody is that nobody has it all together. And that's also
Yeah.
why I feel like comparisons don't work and you should never compare
No.
yourself because nobody has it all together. You can pretend that you do, but you don't, and that's okay.
And
Yeah.
nobody's on the same trajectory. Like
Mm,
nobody's path is the same. Nobody's
no.
gonna. I have people that I graduated high school with whose kids are going off to college right now, and I'm like, and I've got a 4-year-old. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
there's no right way to do this, and there's nothing like the only thing is like, where are you? Where are
Mm.
you? How do you
Yeah.
feel? Like,
Yeah.
what's your feeling about this moment? You
Mhm.
know, if you look at somebody like, man, well, they've got 3 kids in a house and everything already. I'm like, do you want 3 kids in a house right now? Is that where
Mhm.
you are? Or like, is that just you going, well, but look at them having the things we're supposed to do? Like, it doesn't exist. It's just we got to do our own thing. We got to make our own path. We got to figure out how to navigate what gets thrown in front of us. And a lot of that is just responding to what's happening at any given moment, because you're your the things that get thrown at you are not the same things that are going to get thrown at anybody else. Like everyone's getting different things thrown at them, and how we respond to those things are the things that are, are what make us into the people that we are. What is it? It's not how we were born or what we were said. It's our choices that make us who we are. Um, there's a book that I have that's burning a hole waiting for me to read it. But I have to finish other books first called Fluke. It's by Brian Klaas.
Okay.
And it's called Fluke Chance, Chaos, and Why Everything We Do Matters. And I heard it on Hidden Brain, which is another fantastic podcast. You should get Shankar Vedantam on your podcast. I think that'd be really good. Um, but he was talking about just this notion that like every decision we make on a daily basis impacts every other decision that was going to come later on. And
Mhm.
so like everything we do has impact. Everything we do makes a difference. And how does that relate? Well, because you're going to make the choice you need to make in the time, and that's going to determine what your path and your trajectory look like. So of course it's not going to be the same as anybody
Mhm.
else's. Your circumstances aren't the same as
Yeah.
anybody else's.
And I think the important thing is I feel like it's really easy to look back and be like, man, like why did I make that decision? that was so silly, but also giving yourself grace in the past to say you did the best with what you knew and what you were going through and the deck that you had at the time, and like trying to understand that. And even if you made the wrong decision, this is something that I've had to learn multiple times, but even if you made the wrong decision, knowing that now, okay, I made the wrong decision, or I made a decision, not even wrong, just a decision that maybe wasn't the best at the time, but now I can grow and learn from that as well. But never being too hard on yourself for those decisions, or hard on other people for those decisions. Because I mean, at least I truly believe that people try to do the best with what they have in the moment and what they're going through. And that's just
Yeah.
something I have had to remember for myself and others.
No, that's why
Yeah.
grace is so important, right? I
Hmm.
mean, it's the least we can give each other is a little bit of grace to be like,
Yes.
hey, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on. I'd love to try and understand. And for ourselves as well, like, you can still own the decisions you may have made that you
Mhm.
look back on and go, that was not a great choice. I wish I'd done that differently. You can still own that and also be like, and here I am now. What do
Mhm.
I do now? What do I
Yes.
do next? What can I control in this moment? I
Mhm.
cannot go back in time and take that back, no matter how much I wish I could. So,
Yeah.
what do I do next?
Yeah. And then I also, not to back up the conversation again, you also said something as we were talking about decisions, that I really appreciated, and I don't think I realized how much I like needed to hear that. So I'm hoping that any listeners, it was meaningful to you too, because I think that for a lot of people, and I don't know if it's just the era we're in now, or if this has been like it for decades or centuries or whatever it may be, but there's a big focus or pressure, it feels like, on career and on job, and like that being intertwined with like who you are as a person or your goals and things like that, which is like where that my headspace was, where it's like I feel like I have these three passions, where it's like camp, um social emotional health, and conservation, and like grappling with which one do I choose for my career, which one do I want to invest my time in. But hearing you phrase it as in you can have a job or you can do this one thing, but like don't let it mean you can't do those things. And I feel like over the past year I've put less focus on work and more focus on enjoyment. And that just helped me frame like, okay, I'm in a camp job right now, but I also am doing work with Mesh. And I am doing volunteer projects with conservation organizations on the side. And it's like, okay, like, thank you, because I'm realizing that I haven't had to make a this or that decision. Like, I've just kind of unconsciously or subconsciously um, been grasping at the different um, fulfilling things that I have in my life already. So this goes out to anybody that kind of needed to hear that, because your career isn't everything. It shouldn't be everything. And also goes back to what Emma and I were talking about earlier, but finding that happiness and finding that joy in any way that you can, and not trying to, you don't have to sacrifice one thing for the other. So thank you.
Yeah. It just takes intentionality, right? I mean, I think that's sort of the motto of a lot of what as I've listened to, your podcast thus far, um, I feel like there's that piece of intentionality that keeps coming back. Like, yeah, you don't have to make the choice. It's not just going to happen though. Like if you make a choice and you go down a route, like, and then you have to work to cultivate the other stuff that you still want to hang on to. Like, it's not just going to happen. It's not just going
Yeah.
to fall into your lap and be like, oh yes, art exists. I thought and I made art. Like, no, you're still going to have to go like, okay, how do I find time to do that?
Mhm.
Because again, I think I love what you said. I've been focusing on enjoyment, that notion of like what brings you pleasure, what brings you joy. All right, that's amazing. But like sometimes you get to the end of a day and you're just like, ugh, right? You're like, I'm done. I have nothing left. I don't. But like, that's the moment where I say, okay, 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 push past it and go do the thing that is going to bring you joy anyway. Even if you're like, I don't have, and I'm not telling anybody to like run themselves ragged or anything, but like push past the I'm done with this day and I don't have any more to give, and go to the place that whatever that activity is, whatever that thing that is a passion for you, whether it's music, whatever it is, that like when you do it, you know that if you give yourself the chance to get in there, you are going to walk away feeling better about yourself for having given yourself that space to do it, no matter how tired you were when you went into it. Because the enjoyment of the moment, no matter how tired you were when you started, is going to pay off and is going to pay dividends far more than just being like, I'm just going to collapse on a couch. And I'm not saying you can't do that from time to time, but sometimes you got to go, I don't have the gumption, I don't have the energy of the, okay, but I'm going to go do this thing anyway, because I know once I'm in it, it is going to fill me. It is going to fill my soul. It is going to fill my spirit. And I am going to feel better about myself afterwards, even if I'm exhausted right now, even if I feel like I don't have anything else to give. So,
What are those things for you that you, even if you're tired at the end of the day, these things are something that you can lean on or grasp at if you're like, I want to have that enjoyment. I need to have that enjoyment in my life today.
oh man, I feel like, as I've gotten older, the list has expanded
Mhm.
a lot. Like, it's hard to pick one thing. But it's great that the list is expanded because depending upon the day could determine what that is. Like, I really do enjoy cooking. I love cooking. Um, I like baking. I didn't think I would ever be a baker, and then COVID made me a baker, like so many other people. Um, but I'm not a great baker. I wouldn't even classify myself as a baker. But like sometimes you make something, it's like this was so labor intensive. But then you take a first bite of it and you're like, and it was so worth it. I'm exhausted. I'm sweaty because like if you've ever made bread from scratch, like kneading the dough is like a workout in and of itself. But like then you eat it and you're like, oh, this was great. Like this is so worth it. Like everything, this all paid off. And beyond that, if you get to share that with other people and like they feel the same way and they give you that, like boom, more and more dopamine is just firing and dropping down because like not only did I enjoy what I made, but all these other people enjoyed what I made. That's awesome, fantastic. It's like cooking, baking. Sometimes it's just sitting down with my wife and drinking a glass of wine and like intentionally talking about what our day has been like, or making the space to go, we're going to put our phones away. And like, we're not perfect. We still get caught up in the standard couples trope of, hey, I can't wait till the kids go to bed so we can sit on the couch and scroll on our phones together. It still happens plenty, but like those moments where we both know we're in a space where it's like, yeah, let's be intentional about talking about things right now that are not problem solving with our kids or our schedules for the next week, but are just who knows what they're going to be. Like let's explore those. So that's something. Uh, Not only cooking good food, but eating good food, especially with other people. Like I have very rarely walked away from a dinner with a group of people and felt like, well, that was time wasted, and I'm really upset that I made myself move past my tired of peopleness and didn't and went and had this dinner. Like sitting with people and laughing over good food and good drink is will fills me every time. Like I just like that sort of when there's joy around a table, it's life changing sometimes. It's holy. It's almost holy. Like
Yeah.
literally breaking bread together. Like you are communing with the divine in that moment, and that
Yeah.
divine might be just the fact that like we are all of one spirit here. We are all of sharing each other's humanity in this moment. But like that's awesome.
I was about to
Um
say it feels like the most like ancestral form of meeting with
Great.
people. Like it feels
Yeah.
so core because we have different ways now, but like throughout human history, that has been like the major way. Like the yeah, and I'm with you in that sentiment. There's something so nice about it.
Yeah. So, singing, making music, like if I have the ability to, like, especially if I'm lucky enough to have someone who can like accompany me or something like that, like then I can go and sit in a room with someone and a piano and just like make music till 12:30 in the morning, whatever, and lose track of time. I can't guarantee it'll all be good because I'm not regularly practicing and like, keeping my voice in shape nowadays the way that I used to, but um just playing like that that notion of playing with art and with music. Those are all things that do it, and the list goes on. If it's a space where I can get out and go for a hike, I've found the times when I'm most like, this is going to be too much, I'm tired, I don't want to do this. But like, those are the times when I'm most grateful that I got out and you know climbed a mountain or something. Just yeah, I mean, it all comes down to like people, places, things that just make your spirit feel lighter, make you feel better. Um, and usually for me, it's when I'm doing them with somebody else. Like I take more joy when it's a shared experience with somebody. Um, you know, but yeah, those are some of the big ones, I think.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm always curious because you know, people people find fulfillment and find that joy in different ways, and I love hearing how everybody does because everybody's different.
I mean, there's other stuff that sometimes like, and it happens more rarely now for me, but like sometimes that is, and I am not a quiet person. You know this. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm not quiet is not a word that anyone would use to describe me. Nor brief in what I say. Um, but like every now and then, the thing that I do find that recharges me is just some quiet contemplation, and whether it's with like some poetry or whether it's a couple years ago, now that we're in the season of Lent at the moment, even though I'm not really observing at all because I'm not actively going anywhere, is like I had bought this book that was a collection of prayers and poems by different sort of theological writers and things like that, but all pretty progressive minds and things. And I just found that to be something that like I made a goal to like read one a day, and that also was something that just like made me lighter and expanded me. And so finding moments like that as well. I mean, it's like those are
Just for my own
things.
curiosity, do you remember what the name of that set was?
If you give me a second, I can
Okay.
tell you because I know. I'd have to go back a little bit, but
I just know that I for the listeners at home, and I'm sure you also know this, Matt, but I also grew up religious and I don't find myself affiliated with any religious group currently either. However, my senior year, so I went to a Catholic school and they taught us religious philosophy. And there's just I always loved that semester because I feel like it
mhm,
taught me a lot and I was able to think a lot
yeah.
about the world and creation. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it's called A Rhythm of Prayer, which is a collection of meditations for renewal. And I've actually been coming back to that one a little bit in the last few days. Um, because as you know, we both know my friend Emma Sulis. One year I shared one of the poems on my Instagram story one day during Lent, and this was before the political climate and everything that we find ourselves in right now. But the title of the one of the lines within the poem that like struck for her and was the reason I had shared it was because one of the lines was, "Teach me to love the world again." And like that, oh God, like I'm getting kind of misty right now just saying that phrase out loud, because it's so hard to just be like angry at everything right now. Or it's easy to be angry at everything right now, and there's a lot to be angry about. Like there's a lot to be righteously indignant about right now, and there's Melissa was saying the other night as we were sitting on the couch, like I don't have anything to share on my social media lately because I feel weird sharing pictures of my kids playing right now, like running around and laughing and smiling. And I was like, that's that's important right now. Like no matter what's happening in the grand world, like we're still actively sitting here trying to help craft two little people who will hopefully grow up and not be part of the problem, but be part of the solution. Um, and good God, what like a massive weight that is to have on your shoulders to be like, am I doing everything I can? Are they going to grow up and realize that like people have value just by being people, that the systems and structures that we live in don't define your worth or your wealth. Like you are valid and valuable just because you exist. And like That's a lot to put on yourself as a parent, but for anybody as well. Like even if you don't have kids, like there's this other aspect of things that like we still have a world to cultivate. Um, and you were talking about this with the ikigai aspect. When you were speaking with Emma is this the sort of Venn diagram of where like what you're good at, what what you can get paid for, what all these things, what's wrong. There's the Venn diagram that Ayana Johnson, I think is her name. She uses what she calls her climate Venn diagram. That's where you find your climate action is the place where like what's wrong, like what needs to be addressed, overlaps with what you're good at and also what brings you joy. And like the spot where those three meet, that's your climate action. And I think that applies to so many things. But that notion of finding the spaces that give you joy are so key because whether it's the environment, whether it's like trying to preserve the planet and ensure that it's livable for humans for another 100,000 years, or whether it's looking at a political landscape where we're just buried in hatred. Like if you can't find the space to exist in the pieces of the world that you want to preserve and celebrate those things, then you're going to forget what it is you're working for in the first place. And so like you need to find those moments. You can call it hunting the good stuff or looking for the joy or whatever it might be, but we need to balance the work with time in the space to remind ourselves what it is that we're fighting for, what it is that you're working towards, what it is that you want to see in the world. And so yeah, it might feel weird to be like, I'm going to share this picture of me smiling while, people are having their rights ripped away left and right. And yes, yeah, that's a weird dichotomy. And also like you also need to remember the things that you're working for and the space that exists because otherwise how do we know what it looks like when we get there? So
I feel really strongly about that with you as well. It sometimes it feels really strange to be doing this podcast specifically, because I feel like a lot of it is about joy and hope and kindness and community. And the reason why I wanted to create, and I haven't talked about this a whole lot, but the reason why I wanted to create this was in response to everything else happening. Because it felt hard and it felt a little hopeless to just, you know, be existing with everything that's happening and just feeling like no, I can't do anything. I'm one person. What's going to come about it? But remembering, the why we're here, why we are important, even though we're, I'm putting air quotes around these words, but normal people, because we are important and our values are important and the people that we care about are important. And there's going to be a lot of people, there are a lot of people right now saying that, fighting against that, and fighting for a lot of, beliefs that we have, and failing to remember that kindness and the care, um, that, hopefully they were taught. And I hope that, I'm going on a tangent now. I don't want to presume anything about anybody, but it is important to have that hope. It's important to find that joy, because I also feel like when that's lost and we're not, and when we're not sharing that joy with people, you know, we've kind of lost, the fight of the battle. Um,
yeah.
because it's again, we've lost our why, we've lost the reason why we're doing it. And so please keep sharing the photos of your kids playing in the snow. It makes me smile. And you know, we are still important, and everybody that I love and care about are still important, even though it might feel like people are telling us, that they're not. um yeah, so I agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the heaviness, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's and that's the dichotomy, and two things can be true. Like, the phrase that I'm sure many people have heard, that idea that rest is an act of resistance.
Mhm.
Um, And like, yes, that's true. Rest is an act of resistance if you're also simultaneously doing the work when you're not doing the doing the resting. It's like, and that's the challenge. Like, yes, get in there, do the work,
Mhm.
and also every now and then take a step back and live in the things that are feeding you, that are giving you joy, that give you the reasons, um, so that you can find that way forward. You can find that path. You can find that, what is the ideal? What does it look like when we've hit the thing that we want to, or we hit the goal? Um, you got to know what it looks like. Otherwise, you can't say we're here. So yeah,
Um, I I want to shift gears just a little bit,
yeah.
and I know you mentioned Lent earlier, and I know you're talking about your work at the church. Growing up, and you said you stepped away from Salvation Army. I'm curious if you stepped away from just that organization, or if you stepped away from religion as a whole, because it sounded like religion was a pretty important part of your early life. And I know you mentioned Lent again, so I was just kind of curious because I mean, um, I for my background, for the listeners, and Matt, again, I think you might know this, but I again was raised Catholic. However, I don't find myself drawn to Catholicism specifically anymore. But I feel like that's where a lot of my history is, and so it's hard to kind of fully step away. But I'm just curious about your story.
So I think it's man, everything is sort of a wave,
Mhm.
right? Everything's a roller coaster, and I would say that um, when I first really found myself pulling away from the Salvation Army was once I got to college, um, when I started sort of living in a world beyond what like I had crafted for me for my entire life. And not to say that, um, for many who do know, like the Salvation Army is heavily rooted in social services as well as the faith aspect of things. And so like that's one of the reasons that service was such an important thing to me, was because I was constantly engaged in things that were service oriented, and in building connections with the community and aspects of the community that were very frequently on the outskirts of what society would be like. Yeah, we want this person. Like we had a lot of homeless folks who um, came to services in my church. A lot of unhoused folks. Many people who were struggling with addiction, alcoholism, um, things like that. And so like, but they were welcome to the table, because that was part of the core of what the ministry was. Is like, if God is for everyone, then everyone needs to be welcome to the table. um and so like that aspect of things was not a problem for me. Doctrinally, in the Salvation Army, the thing that really sort of made me go, you know what, I don't know that I can stick with this anymore, was the sort of stance on gay marriage at the time. um and so that was what really made me walk away. I didn't walk away from religion wholly. The weird thing for me, that was, as I was walking away from the Salvation Army, I was getting more involved in the Episcopal Church, because that was the camp that I was working at, was an Episcopal camp. And sort of looking at how they did things, and looking at a community that had bishops that were in trouble with some of the churches because they were actively involved in consecrating gay bishops, actively involved in trying to help draft wording and legislation so that like the canons of the church could be altered to allow for gay marriage, more than just blessings of same-sex unions, but allow for gay marriage. That was a space that was like, now that's a church I want to be a part of. Like that's where there's work being done there that's really, really interesting. And so eventually, like, I found myself identifying as Episcopalian. Things that people don't know about the Salvation Army, just to kind of go back for a second, is like, they don't practice the sacraments in the Salvation Army. So like, there's no baptism, there's no communion. The only thing that comes close is marriage, but like, they don't consider marriage a sacrament in the Salvation Army. Um, the reasoning is long and weird, but like, so I had never been baptized, even though I had grown up in the church. I had grown up a Christian. And so when I was in my 20s, I got baptized at camp in the lake because I had decided like I would like to be an Episcopalian, and I think that this is my church home now. But in between those times, like when I was sort of like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I remember my little sister, who I mentioned is a minister in the Salvation Army still. When she was at seminary and still doing her youth ministries work, we'd have long conversations sometime in the car where she'd be like, "Well, you're not going to church anymore, Matt." And like, what are you feeling about it? What are you doing? It's like, I don't know. I think I'm in a place right now where like anytime I step on a stage, I feel like that's an act of worship. Like if I've been given an instrument, if God has given me an instrument that I use with regularity to like and use it well, like then that's an act of worship. Like so it's if I'm not in a church, sitting in a church, like worshiping in a pew, that's not a problem. Like I'm finding other spaces. It's the whole Emily Dickinson. I don't have Emily Dickinson memorized, but like I can sit under a tree and that's my church. And like the woods are my cathedral. And I like, and to an extent, I was like, yeah, that's where I get. But then I also found myself missing again the intentional community that finds out and sort of the collaboration that exists in um, I'm going to use the word corporate worship, um, not not in the framework of corporations, but like when everyone comes together. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Elizabeth with
Mm-mm,
Kate Blanchett, I believe, plays Queen Elizabeth. And there's one line that I really loved, and it basically encapsulated the Episcopal Church for me. Um, One of the main things that's happening within the church when Elizabeth is coming to power is that like Henry VIII had started the Church of England. He died. Mary became queen and began to like reinstate the Catholic Church as the rightful order of things, and started like burning Protestants at the stake and stuff like that. And then Mary gets sick and dies, and Elizabeth is the next heir, and Elizabeth is a Protestant. And so Elizabeth stands up and she's like, "Hey, we're gonna get things in order in the house," and like basically sort of the fomentation of the Church of England as a thing. And there's a line that she has, which is, "You can believe whatever you want, but by God, we will pray out of the same prayer book," which is to this extent pretty much still the same way the Episcopal Church works. They use the metaphor of the three-legged stool all the time. That is, you know, the Episcopal Church is a three-legged stool. It's a belief system that is built on one leg is scripture, one leg is tradition, and one leg is reason. And so like you can't all of those things need to be working together. Like our traditions need to be informed by both scripture and reason. And scripture needs to be looked at from an eye that's able to reason what's happening with it. Scripture should never be read literally. It was never meant to be. It's a terrible route to go down. You know, anybody out there wants to disagree with me, that's cool. I'd love to have that conversation. But it you can't read the Bible without acknowledging socioeconomic things that are happening in the world at the time, the part of the world that it was written in, that these things are coming out of. You have to have the context of
Yes.
everything that was written to fully understand like what's going on. And so like these are all things that I started like diving into when I walked away from the Salvation Army, because I started going, whoa, what, okay, cool. Not that I necessarily think I was a biblical literalist when I was a teenager or anything like that, but like there was a piece of me that's like, Adam and Eve. That's a real story that actually happened. I don't think I believe that anymore, as much as I do that. There are truths within these ancient stories that are there to teach a lesson and teach a lesson. That lesson may be like, oh, if God is all powerful, look what he did in 7 days. Cool. Now you'll always remember that God's all powerful. Cool, cool, cool. Whatever it might be. But
Just
um,
to
yeah,
sorry, just real quick, just to jump in with you, because I agree with you. I think it's for me just a little silly for me personally to take something that was written over 2000 years ago or over 2000 years ago and like not translate it into like the culture and the life that we're living today,
right.
because so much has happened, and that is okay. But it's silly not to, to have a book and treat it so literally, because we are not the same people, society, community that
Yeah.
we were then. As well as I just want to say that I am very grateful because I feel like, and again, I was raised Catholic, and I know there is sometimes miscommunications about Catholics, but I am very grateful that I had a freshman theology teacher, and it was scripture. So from the first day of my freshman year to the last day of my freshman year, we read the Bible. But our teacher was very clear about how the first couple books in the Bible cannot be taken literally because it was so old. And she was like,
Yeah.
this is all one big metaphor and treat it like one big metaphor.
Hmm.
And that shifted my mindset entirely on the church because I was always thought, yes, Adam and Eve is real. The Tower of Babel is real. Like all of these like stories I thought were truths.
Hmm.
And then it was just like everything felt like not like dismantled for me, but in a really good way where I was like, it kind of like gave me solace a little bit.
Well, this is another sort of like wild space where like camp is also sort of responsible for my new interpretations or the way I sort of deal with faith right now, because I was sitting in a morning worship at the camp that I was working at when I was 17. And we were it was a theater week, so like they were mounting a musical that week, and it was the musical Children of Eden by Stephen Schwartz. So what lends itself beautifully is like, oh, let's take a look at like what's happening in the Bible stories that are inspiring this musical, which act one is Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, act two is Noah's Ark, and the flood and everything. One of my favorite musicals, regardless of my feelings about like faith or religion or anything. Like, it's a marvelous musical, and I recommend it for anybody. But there was a group of campers who were sitting there who were like who were talking about like, well, we're looking at Adam and Eve, and like, I don't think this isn't like a real story. Like, this is a metaphor for something. And I looked at the chaplain, like ready for the chaplain for the week to be like, well, what are you talking about? And the fact that Alon was her name, the fact that Alon just sort of was like, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more. Like, tell me more about why you see that and like where you think that. I'm interested and I'm curious. Like, she didn't want to be like, you're right, but she also didn't want to be like, you're wrong. Um, but I just remember sitting there going like, what? Wait, that's a pos. I'm 17 and I'm sitting there at 17 going, that's a possible perspective to have. Wait, what? What?
Mhm.
I'm off kilter. And like, my whole sort of understanding of my faith got broken and rebuilt at that camp that I was working at. Now, right now, I'm not ascribed to any particular church. I do still consider myself probably mostly Episcopalian. Um, my kids like to go to the Bar Harbor Congregational Church every now and then, and I'm friends with Rob Benson, who's the pastor there, and you know, there's good people who are over at Bar Harbor Congregation. Like, so it's like it's a nice welcoming space to be. And I, I don't know that I'm ever going to lose the feeling that there is a higher power, but I don't know how to fully define that. But I don't think that that means that if I don't know how to fully define that, I can't go and practice faith in a way that feels comfortable to me. Um, and like, I don't preach or proselytize to people. I don't, I'm not here to win people over. I once had a friend who I think put it perfectly. We were talking. He was actually deployed in Iraq at the time, and called me at like 4:30 in the morning. My buddy TJ, and TJ loved to get into deep philosophical conversations when he was calling me at 4:30 in the morning from Iraq. And he goes, and he just, at one point, I can't remember what prompted it, but he just goes, sometimes I think about God, and I think about the fact that like, if something happens to me in my life, I call you and I tell you the story. And then I might call my buddy Zach, and I'm going to tell Zach the story as well. But I might miss some of the details with Zach that I shared with you, or I might add some things that I forgot to share with you, or Zach might hear it and interpret it slightly differently. But then if I call my buddy Jason, like, Jason's also going to hear the story the way he hears it. And like, he's going to get some of the information, but maybe not all the information. And like, everyone's telling the same story. Everyone's got the same information. They've just either heard it slightly differently, or I've left out part of what I told them. And so like, you've got a whole new belief system built on this. And like, what if that's what's happening in the world of like religion? It's like, everyone's getting the story, but everyone's hearing it slightly differently, and everyone's details are just a little shifted. And I'm not going to sit here and go, that's blasphemy. I think that's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful thing. Like that, like we can all approach the idea of the divine in the way that works best for us. Um, I will never forget sitting and watching a video about I, I think it was about like Manifest Destiny or something when I was in high school, and they were talking about Jackson's removal of native peoples and the Trail of Tears and everything. And Chief Joseph, who is well renowned for like a lot of his writings right around the time that removal was happening and people were being shifted. There is a quote from him that I am not going to get exactly right, but I think I can get the spirit, which was basically if if God would come to your people in the place that you are, in the place that you came from, and bring himself to you, bring itself, bring themselves to you in a method that worked for you and the place that you were, why is it then very hard to believe that God would do the same for me and my people? And that God would not come to us and present these truths in a method that was accessible and good for us. And it's not that's not the quote at all, but that's the general sentiment of it. And I was just like, well, that's beautiful too. Like that's pretty amazing. Like, yeah, why not? Who's to say that that's wrong? Because this is the thing when you look at religion, when you look at faith, you're looking at things that are matters of the soul and matters of the heart, things that can't be proved. And a lot of people want to say like, well, faith is blind belief and blind trust in the thing that you believe. And that's not right. I think that's completely wrong. Um, I think that being a person of faith is being someone who's ready to keep asking the questions, even when like given an answer, and like wrestling with those things and thinking about those things and wondering about those things, and not just stopping and going. Faith is a trust that something bigger is there. That's what that is.
Yes.
Faith is not a blind belief system. Faith is not an ascription to like a set of rules or a set of orders or anything like that,
Mhm.
because any set of rules or any set of orders that we have are 100% imposed by other human beings, and
Mhm.
we are imperfect. And inevitably, when it comes down to that, we're going to impose rules that either work for some small sect or whatever, or like
Mhm.
don't work for everybody. That's just the nature of being humans. And but when you can sit there and like ask questions and go, I wonder why, and not walk away from it,
Mhm.
but still like go, yeah, I'm curious about that. I wonder, could it be that? Is that possible? Like, then you're engaging with it. And like, what's more, if God exists, if there is a God, if there is some being in the world, which I'm not going to posit that there is or not, but if there is, like personally, I sit there and I go, if I'm a, let's say I'm a teacher. Actually, how about that? Say I'm a teacher. Which students am I going to be more drawn to and more proud of? Am I going to be like the students who are just like, I got everything exactly right and everything is perfect. It's just the way you told me. And I'm just regurgitating everything you said to me, and I've got it. I've got it. I've got it. Maybe if I'm a math teacher, I don't know. But like, I know as a science teacher, I'm sure were drawn to kids that were like, wait a second, but why? Like,
So,
okay, what's that? Like engaging with the material and like trying to make sense of it, and not necessarily looking for a firm answer, but finding what the next question is, right?
so I don't know. This was not written. It's something I wanted to talk to you about in regards to the subject. I don't know if you can read it from my webcam. Can you see that? It's scribble. It's
It's
okay
a
if you
little bit
can't.
science something. I see that.
Yes. So it says science minded.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm glad you bring that up because sometimes it's one of my favorite questions to ask people that are really involved within science. There was one time I was casually seeing somebody who was finishing up his he either was finishing up his medical degree or he was a doctor. And I asked him um, if he believed in anything like spiritual or higher, just out of curiosity. I think it's a really important question to ask.
Yeah.
And he said no, like very, very hard no, which is totally fine. Um, but I asked him, why that was. And he said, well, there's no facts that can prove it, so I just don't believe it, which I thought was very interesting, though, is because the whole point of science is to ask the why.
Yeah.
It is the whole point. 100 years ago, we thought things were fact, and they were very much not.
Hmm.
150, I mean, when Galileo was around, we thought that the sun revolved around the earth. That was fact. And that is not true. And we have to keep asking those whys. And just because we can't discover it now, we don't understand it now, doesn't mean it's not true or
Hmm.
anything like that.
Yeah.
And it's really important. And I think when you resign yourself to the no possible way, I find it very, I don't know, I find it very interesting. Which leads me to something. This is also it's a little bit of a tangent, but it goes back to kind of a little bit what you were saying before of just like the complexities of kind of the world that we're living in. And this might not be a direct connection, but it's something that I like to talk about when we talk about this subject. And when I was in that religious philosophy class, a big part of it was going through arguments of whether um, this is, there is something out there or not. And there was never going to be a yes or no, but it was the guise of it was, let's critically think about this. Like if you need a reason, if you need, something as to why, like let's talk about it. And one of my favorite ones was the watchmaker analogy. Have you heard this analogy?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. So for the ones at home, if you're walking down the road and you see a watch, and it's a Swiss watch. It's ornate. It has all the gears and shifts, and it's a beautiful, beautiful watch. Gold in it. There's little crystals around the edges as well, diamonds. And you see it and you think like this is so beautiful, and all the pieces, the gears fit so well together, and all these pieces are working to make this clock tick. And the logical sort of conclusion, it's either A, this watch magically appeared with all the pieces together to be able to form in the way capacity it is right now. And all the atoms have just randomly aligned in the most perfect way possible to create this watch and have it here at my feet. Or this watch was created by a watchmaker and somebody dropped it. And so the logical argument is that, that feels impossible, that all the atoms aligned so perfectly. And it feels so unlikely that something would have had to have made it and have been intentional with it, which I think is to me, that is like personally such a logical argument. And I know there's probably people who would have another logical argument against that, and I'm open to hearing it. But that is something that has stuck with me, even if I don't believe in religion in the defined sense. Again, because of how you know the it goes back to what you were saying when you were talking about manifest destiny, um, and what that individual said. There's so many cultures, there's so many different groups, and it makes sense that whatever is out there would present themselves in a way that would have made sense to those individuals.
Hmm.
Um, Anyways, I've kind of gone on a tangent now, but that's just one of my favorite things to think about all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's there's a quote that's often attributed to Martin Luther King Jr., but there's debate about whether or not he actually said it. Um, but it's a pretty simplistic look at like the debate between science and religion, which is that, science provides the how, religion provides the why. And like, yeah, that's pretty simple. But I think it's kind of beautiful. Like science and religion don't have to be enemies. Like they don't have to fight each other. Like they're both pursuits of meaning in the world through different avenues, but they're both pursuits of meaning and answers and discovery and things like that. You just got the difference where science is rooted and can be supported by observable phenomenon, and religion most of the time is supported by unobservable personal feeling and experience, and whatever that might look like. And that's challenging because like you can't prove a negative, right?
Mhm.
Someone said to me tomorrow, like, prove, if someone says prove there's no God, I can't be like, well, cool, okay, I can't prove a negative.
Mhm.
um I can only prove what there is evidence for. And if you're
Mhm.
looking for physical, like scientific evidence, yeah, you're going to have a hard time finding any, in terms of faith or religion or anything like that. But again, it doesn't mean, that it's there's not some that we haven't discovered yet. People always say magic is just science we don't understand yet. I think it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there's I read something the other day, and I think this is like what comes back to sort of where I sit from a faith perspective. And I know that, like, for a lot of people I know who were actively involved in the church, and they've sort of walked away as well because, again, living today, like, there's so many people who are claiming the mantle of Christian that are just like distorting horribly what that looks like. And so it's hard to say like, okay, I'll align myself with any faith body because, you know it doesn't feel like anyone's out there fighting really hard against the mantle there. Um, but this, and I can't remember where I saw it online the other day, but someone was saying like, you know, won't it be sad someday if people discover that Jesus returning, quote unquote, was never going to be this one big moment, but a series of opportunities to live into the teachings of Christ by feeding the poor, by sheltering the immigrant, by ensuring justice for others, by clothing the naked, by uplifting people and bringing people together in community. And every time the opportunity actually presented itself, you pushed them away and you chose the opposite of what the teaching was. How sad will it be if that's what it turns into someday? That like it was never going to be one, trumpets will blaze and everything will stop and the world will end and this is going to happen, but like you've been given the opportunity over and over and over again. And what's gonna happen in that realm. And I again, like I've read a lot of things. I'm not an expert in a lot of things. I'm not a, expert in anything, I would probably say. But like, you know, Nietzsche once had a quote that was, "The Messiah will only come when he's no longer needed." And like, what if that is the reality? What if, like, for me, I've always said, why bother working to create paradise somewhere in the afterlife when it's well within our grasp and ability to create it here by ensuring that we are doing all the things that what real Christianity, the teachings of Jesus,
Mhm.
would have called you to do,
Mhm.
which is feed the naked, or clothe the naked, feed the hungry, protect the stranger, welcome the immigrant, love, 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 love. Like that's the story of the Good Samaritan all across the board, is like the person who is reviled and who should have walked right by is the only person who stops and does anything about it,
Mhm.
because it doesn't matter in that moment. What matters is, here's a fellow human being that is in need.
Mhm.
I'm a human being. I can be of service. I can help. I can do something in this moment. So I should, because I'm here. It's that thing that I say to people all the time at camp. If you ever walk by something and you notice it and you see something, you're like, oh man, someone should do something about that. Remember that you're someone, and not everything. We can't do it all ourselves. Like
Mhm.
we need others. We need people. We need community to make those things happen. But
Mhm.
like, every little thing is like, the simplest thing we can do is say, hey, let me see the humanity in somebody
Mhm.
else. Let me see who they are. And whether you are someone who ascribes yourself to a faith journey or you're an atheist, like, I think that's something that everyone could or should agree on,
Mhm.
is that like that's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do. Like, stop worrying about what the meaning of life or what our purpose is, to like lift each other up.
Mhm.
That's what we're here to do. We're here to enjoy this world that has been given to us in a way that allows others to enjoy it for years and years to come, but to like lift other people up when they can't lift themselves up. Like that's our purpose. That's our existence. That's why we're here. And you don't need to be a religious person. You don't need to be a Christian. You don't need to be a person of faith to believe that. Um, because you don't have to believe that all ethical behavior stems from God. Like you can be an ethical person without that
Mhm.
belief. You know, morality and what's right exists whether there is a God there or not.
Mhm.
Like, and that's, that might make some people angry, but yeah, like
Yeah.
those things exist without the presence of the being, and we can do that whether we believe it or not.
I think for a long time, I personally, I didn't consider myself religious. I would never say that I was a religious person, primarily because, I was Catholic, I was raised Christian. And there was always that notion of if you don't accept fully in your heart, if you don't, go to church every Sunday, all these things, then you're not worthy, no matter whatever actions you were taking. And that that crushed me really early on because it felt like, you know, no matter how good a person was, if they weren't subscribing to like this like list of things you needed to do, then you weren't worthy enough. No matter, but you would. I felt like I would have experiences where I could see somebody who was following the list but not following the teachings of the acts, and somehow they were more worthy than a person who, didn't subscribe to Christianity, didn't subscribe to Catholicism, but they were the kindest, most genuine people that I knew, who were the people that were reaching out to others. And that very early on was the reason why I was like, if that is the place, if this place is going to be filled with people like this versus um, people like the first one versus people like the second one who were of service to others, then I didn't want to be in that place. Now, as I'm older, I am realizing that, um, you know, it doesn't matter about the end place. It doesn't matter about the end goal, whatever that may be. What matters is here, now, and the work that we can do now, and the actions we can take now, and the service of others we can do now, because nobody's going to know what happens next.
Hmm.
Nobody does. But what's
Yeah.
most important is doing what we can now. And whatever happens next, you know, happens. I don't
Right.
care. I don't care about the end goal. It feels for me, it feels more self-serving to be worried about the end goal versus worrying about the people suffering and hurting and needing help now. Um, which also, as I have grown, is also, I feel like what the end goal that Jesus had for, humanity anyways, as you talked about, was those acts of service to others, and that was the most important. And even in the Bible, he criticizes the Pharisees, who were the ones to talk to him about the list and are you doing these things? And he was the one to say, this is not what's important. You know, love thy neighbor as yourself and love God the most. And I feel so sad because I feel like that has been lost for some. And I'm not a I'm not a deacon, I'm not a priest. Um, and so I feel like I am at odds to, just I'm not the person that people would turn to or listen to, but I can just hope and, speak my piece, whatever that may be,
Hmm.
and hope for change and hopefully be an instrument of change.
Yeah. That's the best any of us can do, right? I
Mhm.
mean, you do the best you can with what you got, and you make the impact that you can, and hope that impact has ripples.
Mhm.
And if it does, awesome. And but we can all only do the things we can, and that's it.
That's it.
Yeah,
And that's okay.
it is okay.
Mhm.
It is okay. Make the difference the way you can.
Mhm.
And also realize that you're not always going to see the result of whatever difference you're trying to make. Like,
Mhm.
it's not all going to happen right away or immediately. It would be great if we
Mhm.
could all just like wave a wand and all the things would be good. It would be wonderful. But that's not reality. It's
No.
all it's all work. Again, because why? We're all just making it up as we go along.
Mhm. And we also learned that from camp. the work we do at camp.
Yeah.
We're not going to see that instantly, but
No.
after 4 summers there, you, I feel like I can see ripples, and hopefully that comes from camp or other things. But if we're just a small percentage of a positive impact, that means everything. So, yeah.
I shared on the 2025 staff band page the other day. I took a
Mhm.
picture of a letter that I found um, when I was cleaning my office that came in 2023 from a young woman who used to be a camper of both Melissa's and mine, like years and years ago, when we were working together at the last camp that I was at in Connecticut. And I shared it because I was like, hey, this is one of these moments where I mention a lot that you might not see the impact that you have until later. And the final thought she had in her letter was, thank you for all of the love in your hearts. It still carries an impact all of these years later. And it was just like one of those moments where it's like, yeah, I, I couldn't have told you with this girl back when she was a camper, like that was the perspective she was going to have, but like that's something that she thinks about actively now as an adult who's like working and doing things. And that's what amazing weight that is. And like that's the good work, right? That's the good work. Do what you can to love each other, love others, lift other people up, so that hopefully someday somebody realizes that, like, oh yeah, I'm worth it. I'm worthwhile just by being me. And that's, I think that's what we're trying to teach at camp all the time. I think it's what I'm trying to do, why I love theater as well, because that's a message that I think I try and like push through the things that I do when I get to be picky about like the art that I make theatrically, is like I like to pick things that are about people like working hard to lift each other up and you know make things better for one another. Because like that's the only thing we have power over. Let's just be good to each other. Yeah.
We are running not out of time, but we
Time isn't real. What are you talking about?
however, I do think that our time with each other has come to a close because it is getting late. I know it's
Yeah.
even later where you're at. Um, is there anything you want to leave um, our audience with today before we sign off?
Sure. If I can leave them with, you heard this quote last year. It's going to be a quote I share because I think it encompasses a lot of this, a lot of what we've been talking tonight. And it's one I first heard Jeff Goldblum actually share on an episode of the Tonight Show or the Late Show or something. But George Bernard Shaw, playwright in England in the 1800s, 1900s, really a very progressive playwright, very about workers' rights and looking at like a humanist perspective on the world. Um, but he has this quote that Jeff Goldblum shared that I have fallen in love with. And it can feel rough around the edges, but I think it hits a lot of the things we talked about. So I'm just going to share that, if that's okay.
Go for it.
This is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I have got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Burn as brightly as possible for future generations. I think that's something that is something that I enjoy and I think of, and I think of a lot. And I know there's a lot of fear, but as long as, we do our best, to make sure that light's shining as brightly.
That's the best we can do.
That is. That is the best we can do.
Yeah.
Well, Matt,
Yeah.
we're going to close out for today. I don't know if you're interested, but if people want to follow you on Instagram, are you open to sharing or?
Sure. I cannot ever remember my Instagram handle.
Okay.
So if you give me just a moment, I'll tell you what it is. That's me. I'm just Cornish695 on Instagram if anybody wants. If you do choose to follow me, all you'll do is see pictures of my kids, ugly Christmas sweaters, and me trying to remember to take at least one 5-minute walk every day and talking at the camera while I do because it gives me something to do.
And you can follow us at Beauty and Being Podcast on Instagram. Again, still have not updated the Facebook page. Will that ever happen? Time will tell.
Who
And then my
knows?
and then my personal is S_Callahan98. Thank you so much for listening today. And Matt, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was really a pleasure. And it was just great to talk with you.
It's good to talk to you too.